Good morning, Mr. Swann.
Morning, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you, sir. Yeah.
Now, whereabouts are you? You're in Northern Ireland somewhere?
In a room within the Department of Health here, so in one of our conference rooms. So,
and you're there on your own, or?
The storm of the state.
Yeah.
Well, Ross is here, the IT guy is here with me to make sure all this works.
And let me tell you who you're talking to here. Where I sit, I'm in Fleetbank House in London, and there are around 20 or so people. We have some who are members of the public who've come to watch. There are some lawyers and members of the staff and the press. And beyond this room, there will be about 100 or so people who will be very keen to watch remotely. I suspect quite a number of those will be in Northern Ireland, and many of whom you will probably know. But that's the audience that you're speaking to. Ms. Richards will be asking you the questions, but first I'll ask Mary to invite you to take the oath.
Thank you, Sir Brian.
Please state your full name.
Robert Samuel Swann.
Take the book in your raised hand and repeat after me. I swear by Almighty God.
Swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Good morning, Mr. Swann. Can you see and hear me?
I can, Miss Richards, yes.
You've been Minister of Health in Northern Ireland since January 2020, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And a member of the Legislative Assembly since 2011?
That's correct, yes.
In broad terms, what are your roles and responsibilities as Minister of Health?
I have the oversight of the department here within itself and the welfare and well-being of the people of Northern Ireland that come from that position and that role and responsibility.
Now, when you took up your position in January 2020, what did you know and understand about the suffering that had been experienced and was still being experienced by those who were infected with HIV and hepatitis C in Northern Ireland and the suffering experienced by their families?
When I took up the position on the 11th of January, it wouldn't have been a topic that I was greatly aware of, but when I took up the post, I did receive a comprehensive briefing and have since met directly with those who have been infected and affected and heard firsthand of the suffering that they endured, and have also received a number of correspondence cases from those infected and infected as well. And I think actually one of my first meetings was actually to meet those who had been infected and affected in my role as Minister. I think that was about the 13th of February.
We'll look at some of your interactions and the decisions you've taken in due course this morning. In broad terms, has it been important for you to hear directly from those infected and affected about their experiences? And has that helped inform and shape your decision making?
It has very much. One of the things I've done since taking up this role is actually to meet with the people who are infected or affected by any health decision or any procedure that has been of concern. And that's why I thought it was important to meet with those who have been infected and affected in the contaminated blood inquiry at the beginning. So that's why I did that within a month of taking up position, and really engaging with them as individuals, both as those who have been infected, but also by the individuals who have been affected due to their loved ones being infected as well, was important as to how I was able to shape and formulate my decisions with the advice and support from my officials.
And we'll look in due course again this morning at a fairly detailed written submission made by your officials to you in March of 2020. But I think it's right, your attention was drawn in that submission to the written and oral evidence that had been given by infected and affected people to the inquiry, and also to the evidence, both written and oral, that have been given by the psychosocial expert group to this inquiry?
That's correct, yeah.
Now, you obviously were not involved in the decision to establish the infected blood payment scheme in Northern Ireland, and we'll be asking Ms Redmond some more detailed questions about that in due course later today. But just so that we can get the key dates and the chronology established, I think this is right. Following the decision in July 2016 by the UK government, as published in its response to the consultation that had taken place, the then Minister for Health, so your predecessor, Michelle O'Neill, took a decision in December 2016 to replicate the proposed new English scheme. Is that right?
As my understanding has it, yes.
We've got in the written materials a copy of the statement that she made to the Northern Ireland Assembly in that regard. I don't think I need to ask you to look at that. Is this also right, as far as you're aware, that there was no specific consultation with the infected and affected community in Northern Ireland in advance of that decision?
I would be unaware of that, and I think maybe if Dr. Redmond could maybe answer that in our next session.
Certainly. Have you, however, gained any particular understanding since you became Minister as to why the decision was taken to replicate the English scheme?
I haven't, no. I think one of the things is, I think we said in an earlier answer, when I came in to post on the 11th of January, it was about taking the decisions that was within my remit and my gift to make at that time, and shaped by the input I had from officials, but also having met those who have been affected and affected as well.
Okay. Well, we can pick those matters up then with Ms Redmond later. Now, that decision having been taken by your predecessor in December 2016, January 2017, the Northern Ireland Executive collapsed, and there was then no Minister for Health until you took over in January 2020. Is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And so is this right? Again, just in very broad terms, I'm not going to ask you about detail. The decision having been taken in principle by your predecessor to replicate the English scheme, the officials within the Department of Health made arrangements for that to be administered by, I think, the Regional Business Services Organisation within Northern Ireland. But for the period of time that followed until you took over, the view that was taken was that no substantive amendments could be made because of the lack of a minister.
That would be my understanding, and it would be across a number of departments, not just within health during that period where there were no ministers in place.
So there was effectively, when you took over, there'd been, as it were, a vacuum in terms of decision making, and what you inherited, as it were, was a scheme in some sense frozen in time as at April 2017.
That would be correct, yeah.
And would you agree that the effect of that, leave aside whatever the reasons for that state of affairs might have been, the effect of that had been to leave the infected and affected community in Northern Ireland substantially disadvantaged?
And I think that from taking up post on the 11th of January, when it was within my gift to make those changes and meet with the families of those infected and unaffected to see what progress could be taken. And I think you referred to, the substantive brief that I received in March as well. So there were a number of issues across this department and across many departments that had lay waiting for a minister to be in place to make a number of decisions.
And again, just so that we can understand then the factual context for the decisions you then took, if we look at that ministerial submission, it's WITN 5570021, please, Seamus. We can see it's a submission addressed to Mr Pengelly and then to you as Minister, dated the 4th of March 2020. I'll come back to it again later in the course of my questions to you. But if we just, first of all, turn to page 19. We can see in the table that's set out in paragraph 46 one of the disadvantages that had been experienced by the community in Northern Ireland was that there had been a divergence between the rates that had been increased in England in April 2019 and the rates that were being paid in Northern Ireland. And we can see those rates set out there. We'll come on to see what changes you then made. But that was one of the significant disadvantages, was it not, that the community in Northern Ireland had experienced?
That'd be correct, yeah.
And then if we go to page 22, paragraph 54, please, Shomek, which is the bottom half of the page. We can see under the heading Other Financial Support, we can see it says that prior to April 2019, Northern Ireland had parity with England on regular payments. However, there was no parity on other financial aspects of the scheme, including the special category mechanism. So there was none in Northern Ireland. Income top-ups. In England, both the rates and income thresholds are higher than in Northern Ireland, where the legacy Caxton and McFarlane lower rates are still used. And then discretionary support one-off grants. England has a formal policy on discretionary support, while a policy is yet to be adopted in Northern Ireland. Now, again, we'll ask Ms Redmond some more detailed questions about some of these matters, but that's what you inherited, effectively.
That's correct, yes.
Now, your appointment had followed the deal to restore devolved government in Northern Ireland, New Decade, New Approach. And if we can just turn to that, please. Shomek, it's WITN 557002. Sorry, 0002, my apologies. So we can see there, New Decade, New Approach, and we can see the date over the next page. January 2020, and then if we go to the next page, we can see that it comprises in part an articulation of priorities of the restored executive, and then an agreement in relation to the formation of a Northern Ireland executive. And then if we go to, so look, I think it's page 9. Yes, so if we look at the bottom half of the page, so these are some of the priorities that were being identified. And if we look towards the bottom of the page, just above the blue heading, Developing a New Programme for Government, we can see it says, the executive will bring about parity and financial support to victims of contaminated blood in Northern Ireland with those in England. Do you know why New Deal, New Approach sought to bring about parity with England as opposed to any other part of the United Kingdom at that stage?
I'm not aware of why that final text was actually included in that format, because New Decade, New Approach was a deal drafted between UK and Irish governments in an attempt to restore devolution here in Northern Ireland. So it was a comprehensive document that had taken input from all of the political parties who had an ability to be in the executive, but also both governments as well. So it was, I suppose, a culmination of things that all parties wanted to see. So I'm unaware as to why England was specifically included as the reference point in that document.
To your knowledge, has there been either at any time since 2017 or at any time since 2020 when you took up your post, any kind of full or comprehensive assessment of the actual needs of or losses sustained by victims in Northern Ireland?
Not that I'm aware of, and the decision hasn't been taken actually to take this forward. At this point, we have had a wide-ranging consultation that we actually put out to affected and unaffected a few months ago, where we got feedback from that group, but no detailed assessment has been delivered by my department.
And is that something which your department and you are open to considering?
Most certainly, yes. I think one of the things that we have learned as a department and I as Minister, when we've met with the individuals who have been infected and affected, is to listen to what their asks are. So if there is a request for that work to be taken forward, it's something certainly that we will consider. taken forward in a future work programme.
And in terms of the period of time since you have been Minister, has any specific consideration been given to whether aspects or elements of the scheme operated in the Republic of Ireland should be incorporated in Northern Ireland?
We haven't done that direct read across in regards because of our part of seeking parity, initially in New Decades with England, but also since the engagement we've now had at a foreign nation level, especially since the ongoing conversations with the Paymaster General.
Now, I want to look now at some of the specific decisions that you've taken since you took up your post. If we start with WITN 557003, please, Shomik. This is the announcement of the 27th of January 2020. WITN 557003. So we can see, Mr. Swann, this is a publication of 27th of January 2020, and it says, Health Minister Robin Swann has announced payments for people who were diagnosed with hepatitis C or HIV after receiving NHS-supplied infected blood. The interim payments for Northern Ireland beneficiaries of the Infected Blood Payment Scheme, if we just go down the page a bit, please, Shomik, will range between £4,000 and £8,000 per person, depending on individual circumstances. It's expected that further support may be provided before the end of this financial year, informed by a wider ongoing review of overall provision for victims. The interim payments will be made possible by £1 million allocation to the Department of Health through the Department of Finance's January monitoring round. And then there's various statements that you make. So can you just tell us a little about the background and your own decision-making which led to this announcement?
In regards to this announcement, as the statement says, under New Decade, New Approach, there was a commitment there from the executive. In the January monitoring round of that year, is where our Department of Finance sees what excess spends have been returned to the centre. I was allocated a £1 million payment to meet that need. It was a one-off payment for that year. So I wanted to take the first step in meeting that commitment that we had made under New Decade, New Approach. It was also coupled with an announcement of a 3-phase review of the Northern Ireland scheme. So really the first interim initial payments was to start us on the process and to work our way towards parity, but also after having engaged with the families of those who have been infected and affected as well.
Now, this was, as it were, a step on the road to parity with England rather than immediately achieving it. Is that right? These were not necessarily at this stage going to be long-term payments, and they didn't fully make up the difference between the Northern Ireland rates and the English rates. Is that right?
That's correct, yes. It was that first step also. And as I say, we announced at the same stage was the 3-phase review. So we had that engagement with those who have been infected and unaffected.
Yes, and I may ask you a little more about those 3 phases shortly. Now, this refers to the allocation of £1 million through the Department of Finance's January monitoring round. I think it's right to say that the announcement that was made at this first stage, January 2020, didn't use the full £1 million allocation. Is that correct?
That's correct, because something I wanted to do as well was to assess what support could be given to those who had also been bereaved as well. So that wasn't included in this initial announcement. So we wanted to make, I suppose, that first step, as it's been described as, but also to make sure that there still was some monies to do other things that we may seem necessary or may want to do after having had that engagement.
And then we can see that I think the next step you took was a meeting with some of those who had been infected or affected. And so if we look at the record of that, it's WITN 5570004, please, Seamus. And we can see it's dated the 13th of February 2020. A number of those in attendance, we've redacted names for obvious reasons, but it was included, I think, both campaigning or representatives of organisations and individuals who'd been infected or affected. And then if we look at the bottom of the page, we can see it says, key points discussed. The Minister set out the current position in relation to financial support. Interim payments announced on 27th of January was a decision Minister had taken on his own, and he apologised if it was taken the wrong way. What did you mean by that?
I think it was a recognition a misunderstanding or any hurt that had been caused by the fact that I hadn't used the whole £1 million that had been referred to as an interim payment. I think some of the families had misinterpreted that as an intention that I wasn't fully committed, but I think after the meeting that we had, I hope realised that it was my intention as Minister to use the full amount, but also to do it after having met with them and consulted with them. And that's why I think the second bullet point there actually commits to the spending the remaining allocation before the end of that financial year.
And if we go on to the third page, we can see, if we pick it up after the first three bullet points, we can see that part of the meeting was attendees describing to you the impact of being infected or affected. And then we can see a little further down, about halfway down the page, that each member of the group attending recounted their personal experience, and a number of particular matters are there set out, embracing a range of different detrimental impacts. The meeting's described later in this notice having been a very emotional one. What impact did it have on you, Mr. Swann?
Jenny, it was an emotional meeting. It was a challenging meeting for me as well, because having only been in this post for the first 4 weeks, it was a meeting that I thought it was necessary for me to have to get the full understanding. But some of the things that I heard coming from those who have been infected and affected was challenging to hear. It's not something that I expected as Minister of Health to have had occur to people in Northern Ireland as part of a service that should have been delivered safely by the self-health service here. So, and as I said in some of my opening comments, since taking up this post, I find it important to engage with people rather than simply policy or procedure. So as far as I'm concerned as Minister of Health, it's our people that are at the centre of the service. So that's why I thought it was important to have this meeting. And the meeting note does say how challenging this meeting was, and acknowledges that.
Now, the following month, March 2020, we can see that a further decision was taken in terms of payments. And so if we go to, shall I make WITN 5570006, please. So we can see here the date is the 23rd of March 2020. Health Minister Swann has announced additional payments for people affected by contaminated blood. The payments range from around £3,000 to £6,700 and will be made to those people on the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme who were diagnosed with hepatitis C or HIV after receiving NHS-supplied infected blood. Announcing the additional one-off payments which bring the Northern Ireland scheme into line with the scheme in England for 2019-20. And then it records you saying, referring to the meeting that we've just been talking about, and talking about your reaction to the suffering that they had to endure. And then if we go over the next page, we can see at the top of the page you talk about the hurt that the divergence with England had caused in Northern Ireland. And then if we go halfway down the page, just after the bold print, it says, in addition to the payments to those infected individuals on the scheme, the Minister has also announced that he will make a one-off payment of £5,000 to all 17 non-infected widows and widowers who are part of the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme. So again, could you just perhaps give us a little background and context to your thinking and the decision-making process which led to this announcement?
Again, I was conscious after having received the brief from officials and having spoken to the families of those infected that it was something that we didn't have here in Northern Ireland in regards to a payment for non-infected widows or widowers. And as I said in the earlier contribution in regards to the £1 million, I wanted to make sure that we could explore the avenue for that within that £1 million one-off allocation, and also from additional resources within my department. We were able to make that initial payment for those non-infected widows and widowers who were actually part of the Northern Ireland scheme.
And if we go to WITN 5570005, we can see that you met with those representing some of the campaigning organisations to discuss this announcement prior to the announcement being made. So if we look at the bottom of the page, under the heading Key Points Discussed, Infected Blood Payment Scheme, the Minister provided details of what he intended to announce later today. And then we can see the second bullet point, confirmed that he would make payments that would achieve 100% parity with England on infected beneficiaries payments for 2019-20. Confirmed that he was also making a one-off payment for £5,000 to all 17 non-infected widowers. Referred to there being £1 million in the draft budget for 2020-2021. Emphasised that the £5,000 payments were a one-off. And then if we go over the page, and we pick it up in the fourth paragraph, we can see it says that Minister stated that the budget is for 1 year only and that this year and next year are covered. While he did not know what his tenure as Minister would be, he hoped that any future health minister would not break the cycle. And then again, you refer to the three-stage or three-phase approach being taken. And then if we just go to the top of the next page, we just look at the first three lines. Do we understand this announcement incorporated the £400,000 that was remaining from the January £1 million allocation, plus some additional funding taken from the existing Department of Health budget?
That's correct, yeah.
But if we just then go back, to the previous page, page 2. Again, if we just look at that fourth paragraph, which I read out, is it right to understand that at this point you were not able to give a longer-term commitment in relation to payments or future steps towards achieving parity?
That's correct. As I say, I only have, our elections are due in May, so I don't have a full mandate to serve in this post, so I'm able to do what I can do in that period of time. But we're also working under the financial constraints of a single annual 1 year budget, step by step. So we only get our allocations on a 12-monthly basis across any department. So it does make those long-term financial commitments challenging, which I hope that part of this inquiry can address, that these are actually embedded long-term recommendations and commitments from even my successors.
Now, I just want to go back to the submission. We looked at it briefly earlier, but the submission that you'd received from officials within your department prior to making your announcement in late March 2020. So, Shomik, if we can go back to WITN 5570021. I just want to start by going to a background section. So if we go to page 4, please. Under the heading background, there are some paragraphs which set out matters which predate your appointment, Mr. Swann, but this was a submission being addressed to you, so I just want to see whether you have any further understanding or can cast any further light on these matters. So we can see paragraph 8 summarises the period when there were 5 UK-wide schemes, and then each country having its own infected blood payment scheme since 2017. There's then reference in paragraph 9 to the English increase in April 2019, which led to this divergence with Northern Ireland. We go to the top of the next page. We can see it says this increase in payments by the English scheme resulted in an unforeseen and sudden disparity with Northern Ireland. Just pausing there again, I'm obviously again conscious as I am that this predates your appointment, but based upon what you have learnt from officials for the purposes of your own decision making, is it your understanding that Northern Ireland did not know in advance that these increases were going to be made in spring 2019?
I would be unable to comment on that in detail, Ms Richards, in regards to what engagement had been had at official level. But my understanding from that brief would have been, as it says there, that they resulted in unforeseen and sudden disparity, that announcement wouldn't been have fully understood or discussed with officials. But I think Ms Redmond can update that in her deliberations afterwards.
Well, we can take that up as necessary with her. And then paragraph 11, again, this is before your appointment, but it's not long before your appointment, and I'm hoping that you will have had some understanding of what the financial position was when you then took up your post. This says that on the 4th of September, in the Chancellor's spending round speech announcing Northern Ireland's Barnett consequentials allocation, this quote, the Chancellor is saying that there was an extra 400 million for Northern Ireland, and then saying, welcoming the case made by the DUP for improved hospice care and support for those that have been tragically wronged in the contaminated blood scandal. Those are rightly devolved matters. I sincerely hope that the Northern Ireland administration will use some of the new funding we're providing today to address those issues. And then the comment from your officials is, however, there was no new money allocated to Northern Ireland specifically for infected blood in the spending round. And these comments only serve to raise expectations. Again, we can obviously pick this up with Ms Redmond as necessary, but what was your understanding when you took up your post in January 2020 of this extra £400 million, which was said to have been allocated to Northern Ireland, and what it was intended to cover?
Well, from reading that paragraph and that commitment as well, the 400 million was allocated to Northern Ireland, but there was no specific allocation for infected blood. And I think that's what we covered in an earlier document, where you actually see the £1 million that I received came in a monitoring round bid in submission in January from our own Department of Finance. But at that point in September 2019, there was none of that. £400 million was specifically allocated to the Department of Health to cover those issues.
And then if we can turn on in this document to, I think it's page 38, Seamus. No, it's not, sorry, forgive me. It's paragraph 38. It's page 17, Seamus. You'll see there the heading meaning of parity, and I just wanted to look at some of the paragraphs with you and then explore, again, from your perspective as Minister and your department's perspective, the approach to parity. So paragraph 38 refers to the commitment in New Decade, New Approach, which we've already looked at. And then paragraph 39 says this: there's no consensus as to what parity between the Northern Ireland and English schemes would mean in practice. In particular, it could relate to going beyond simply the regular payments to include parity on areas where differences between the two schemes existed prior to April 2019, including discretionary support, one-off grants, income top-ups and the special category mechanism. Work on these elements of the scheme was paused in 2017 in the absence of a minister and following the announcement of the inquiry. The term greater parity is taken from Jackie Doyle Price's statement about the uplift in England. This expression implies that there are degrees of parity, i.e. that parity does not necessarily mean uniformity. The term convergence would have been more useful, but English ministers have raised an expectation that parity effectively means uniformity. Go over the page. In financial support across the UK. This is despite specific agreement at the Four-Nation Ministerial discussion in July 2019, in which Richard Pengelly took part, that we should aim for parity of support, i.e. ensuring that those infected and affected received a level of support, both financial and non-financial, which addressed their needs. In practice, such an approach would mean that individuals receive a higher or lower level of financial support in different regions, recognising local circumstances, e.g. relevant costs and other factors. And then paragraph 41 refers to Northern Ireland campaigners having taken up parity with England as their goal. If we then go to paragraph 42, it says a further consideration is the preservation of devolved authority in this matter. A permanent or indefinite commitment to replicate the provisions in the English scheme may not be possible if this would bide the hands of any future Northern Ireland Minister of Health as regards tailoring the Northern Ireland scheme more closely to the needs of its beneficiaries. While some form of parity is agreed at ministerial level, GB health ministers are in agreement that this should be done while respecting the devolved status of health to allow some flexibility in each country's scheme. While this department is working to establish a defensible rationale for changes to the scheme, we are aware that English ministers' decision to raise payments in 2019 was a political decision not underpinned by any such rationale, so that there is no DHSC analysis from which we could extrapolate. And then paragraph 44 refers to there being many factors to take into account. And then if we go, sorry if I find the reference, to paragraph 62, page 26. The submission to you said this at paragraph 62. It's clear that the impacts on people bereaved through infected blood and their needs in terms of financial and other assistance demand serious and urgent consideration and appropriate responses. For immediate purposes, the main parameter for this decision is the amount secured in January monitoring. This was based on the sum needed to provide parity with the English scheme, albeit in 2019-20 only. NDNA commits to bringing about parity, so that's New Deal, New Approach. The focus of groups of affected people campaigning for parity has been the restoration of parity in those payments, where there was parity between Northern Ireland and England until April 2019. While there are interpretation issues with the word parity, in plain English, it is synonymous with equality. And then there's a discussion of different options, and we know what your ultimate decision was. We've looked at that. Mr. Swann, the reason for taking you to that is to try and understand what, as at March 2020, your approach was to parity. What were you trying to achieve in terms of achieving parity, given that there appears to be a description here of there being possibly different ways of understanding what parity means?
Yeah, no, and it was, as reference to graph 62 and about bringing about parity. My intention was to move to the same payments as there had been within the English scheme and make sure that we were matching those as an initial step. And that's why I took that stepped approach when we had those monies and the decisions and the announcements that I actually made earlier in 2020 to do that.
So is this right? In terms of the regular payments, your approach to parity was essentially, as set out here, equality with the English scheme?
That's correct, yeah.
I may come on to ask you a little more in due course when we look at more recent developments about some of the other aspects, in particular what's proposed in terms of the special category mechanism. But again, just taking it chronologically, if we can then move to the following month, April 2020, and look at WITN 5570007, please, Shomik. Now, this is a letter written by you, 9th of April 2020, again to representatives of campaigning organisations, those who you'd met with on the 23rd of March. And you explain what your 23rd of March announcement is intended to mean. You recognise in the next paragraph the great emotional and financial suffering of family members, those affected. And you refer to the payment with widows and widowers. Again, I'm going to come back to the issue of the bereaved in due course. And then you say at the bottom of the page, I appreciate you're keen to maintain this momentum and secure a permanent uplift in funding for the future. In our meeting, I advised that there was £1 million included in the draft 2021 budget, but made clear that this had not yet been finalised at that point. I am pleased that the Finance Minister has since confirmed this in the budget announcement on the 31st of March. As the £1 million has now been confirmed within the 2020-2021 budget, it will be in our baseline going forward, and therefore I consider it to be recurrent. And then top of the next page, you say, I can assure you that this £1 million will be used in full as intended to provide support to those impacted by infected blood. And I'll make a further announcement of payments for 2020-2021 once I've given full and proper consideration as to the most appropriate way to use this funding. So again, just to try and unpick and understand that, this was not at this stage a further announcement in relation to payments, but it was confirmation that the £1 million that you had received was, as far as you understood the position, going to be, as it were, a regular feature of the Department of Health's budget. So you should be able to continue the already announced payments for the following years. Is that a correct
That's
summary?
correct. That would be correct, because the first, as I say, the first £1 million we received was a result of a monitoring round allocation, but this was actually the confirmation from the Minister of Finance that it would be now a baseline amount.
And then if we just pick up in the third paragraph the three stages, just again so that we can understand what you meant by the three-phase approach to reviewing financial support. You say phase one commenced with the announcement of interim payments, and you refer to the January and March announcements that we've looked at. And then you say in the next paragraph, phase two of the review will continue in 2020-21 and will address other aspects of the scheme with a view to working towards greater parity of support across the UK schemes, while taking account of local circumstances and beneficiaries' needs in Northern Ireland. Phase three will address recommendations from the infected blood inquiry once it's included. So can I just ensure I understand phase two? It would appear from the description in your letter here of phase two that you are now looking not simply at the position in England, but interested in exploring what the other schemes in the devolved nations included, to see whether there were elements that should be introduced in Northern Ireland.
That'd be correct, yes.
If we then move forward to August of 2020, WITN 5570008, we can see what I think was your next, in chronological order, your next announcement. So this is the 30th of August 2020. Health Minister Swann has announced increased payments for beneficiaries of the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme. The increased annual payments made to people on the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme who were diagnosed with hepatitis C or HIV after receiving NHS-supplied infected blood or blood products range from £18,745 to just under £45,000, depending on diagnosis, and bring Northern Ireland's rates into line with England, where payments were increased significantly in April 2019. These increased payments will continue into future years. So was this, as it were, the final step in achieving the direct parity of payment in terms of the regular payments to infected beneficiaries between Northern Ireland and England?
It is, yes. And that, I suppose, was the intention of travel that we indicated from February in regards to the first payments that were made.
And then if we go to, I'm sorry, I should just say, we can see it says there these increased payments will continue into future years. So that's what you hadn't been able to give in March, as it were, a commitment that this would now be the baseline for the payments going forward.
That's correct, because of the budget allocation at that stage. But also at that point in time, we also announced there would be a survey, and that was part of stage two as well, of those who have been infected and affected as well.
Yes, and indeed you've anticipated my next question. So if we go to the third page...
Apologies.
No, not at all. If you go to the third page, Seamus, we can see halfway down the page, it says, in addition to the uplift in rates to those infected beneficiaries on the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme, Minister Swann also announced his intention to conduct a survey of all scheme beneficiaries in Northern Ireland to seek feedback on other support provided, both financial and in terms of psychological support. Now, although it takes us perhaps slightly out of chronological order, I just want to ask you a couple of questions about the survey results. So if we go to WITN 5570020, we can see there, this is the beneficiary survey, the report summarising it, October 2020. And I'm not going to ask you about the detailed representations about financial support, but I think it's right in broad terms to say that there were a number of responses received with suggestions as to how the financial support arrangements could be improved.
Yep, that's correct, yeah.
And then if we go on to page 9, I just want to pick up an issue about psychological support. If we look at the heading Section 8, psychological/mental health support, we can see it says there 34 respondents were not aware that psychological support is available from the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust for patients and families affected by contaminated blood or the infected blood inquiry. And then it refers to the numbers who were using it. So given the numbers who I think responded to the survey, that's a fairly significant number who were not aware of the psychological support service. I know the service itself is provided by the Belfast Health and Social Care Trust and obviously not directly by the Department of Health. But do you know what, if any, steps have been taken since receipt of this survey report to try and increase awareness about the psychological support service?
It is engagement through the work of the Belfast Trust and through their multidisciplinary teams to make sure that any of those patients who are coming forward are aware of the multidisciplinary team approach. It's something that we want to provide as that psychological support to all those who have been infected as well, to make sure that it's there to meet their needs and support them as well, because it was also something that was highlighted as well through the conversations and meetings that we had even back in February of 2020.
And again, I think this is right. Perhaps you can confirm your understanding. The psychological support service, unlike the financial support, not limited to widows, widowers, spouses, partners. It's open to a broader range of family members. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
And what, if anything, is the long-term commitment to the funding of the psychological support service?
That detail, and again, Ms. Redmond can follow up on that and her evidence, but it would be my understanding that the department is working with the Belfast Trust to make sure that support is there after the inquiry actually finishes as well, because it was initially instigated for the duration of the inquiry, but we have seen the benefit that it is bringing, so it will be a direction of travel that it would be long-term rather than a fixed term.
And then if we then move forward in time to the next announcement, which I think you made in terms of changes to the scheme, we're now early March 2021, WITN 5570017. So we can see, again, the date is the 1st of March 2021. Health Minister Swann has announced annual financial support for those bereaved as a result of NHS contaminated blood. The annual payments will be made to people registered on the Northern Ireland Infected Blood Payment Scheme who have not been infected by contaminated blood, but have been left bereaved following the death of a spouse or partner who contracted hepatitis C or HIV after receiving NHS-supplied infected blood or blood products in Northern Ireland. And then if we go to the bottom of the page, it says the payments represent a departmental funding commitment of around £400,000 annually, a range from £14,079 to £33,561 per year. These payments will be backdated to April 2020 and will continue into future years, rising annually with inflation. And then if we go to the next page, please, Shomik. If we look at paragraph 4 towards the top of the page, it says the new payments for non-infected bereaved beneficiaries are calculated at 75% of the payment their deceased spouse or partner was receiving, or would have been entitled to receive were they still living. And then we see the details of the different payments for the different categories of infection there set out. So is it right to understand that this is the first time that regular annual payments for the bereaved have been introduced in Northern Ireland?
That's correct. And again, I think it was the next step after having made the initial £5,000 payment earlier the previous year, that it was my intention in a direction of travel that those who have been bereaved would also receive that payment as well.
And we see it's 75% of the payment that the spouse or partner was receiving or would have received. So is it right to understand that this is essentially drawn on the Scottish model, but without the 100% payment that the Scottish model provides for the first year following bereavement?
That's correct, yes.
And it's also right, I think, to understand fairly clearly from this, these are payments that are limited to spouses or partners who've been bereaved. No wider family member can receive these payments.
No, it is for spouse or partner.
Okay. And again, that's an issue I want to come back to a bit more generally. Chronologically, we'll then get to the announcement made by the Paymaster General later in March 2021, but I want to come back to that towards the end of my submissions and explore with you a little more widely what discussions have taken place between the four nations. So we'll, as it were, park that for now. Can I ask then, in broad terms, what's your understanding? So we can take that down, Shemik. What's your understanding, or the understanding within the Northern Ireland Department of Health, as to the rationale for these payments? What are they designed to cover or reflect?
To support those who have been infected or affected due to the contaminated blood, and challenges and the stresses and strains that they have faced as individuals and as families since those incidents have occurred.
And is it right to understand, and do you accept that the payments within the current scheme, whether as originally set up or as amended following your decisions, they're not intended to account for or compensate for past losses? They pay, with some backdating in some cases, a sum of money on an annual basis to assist people in meeting living expenses. Is that their essential purpose?
That would be my understanding of what these payments are for.
And do you consider, as Minister for Health in Northern Ireland, and leave aside any questions of legal responsibility, but do you consider that there is a moral responsibility on the part of government generally and in Northern Ireland to try and address the impacts and the suffering that people have experienced?
There is, yes, and I think there's a moral responsibility not just on the Department of Health here in Northern Ireland or the executive, but government as a whole, to make that acknowledgement, and also to do what we can to do what we can to make sure that's corrected, but also to consider what is in line what is our moral responsibility for those who have been both infected and affected.
And then we looked at the submission that your officials provided to you in March 2020. I'm not going to go back to it, but there were references there to the role of devolution, if I can put it that way. What role does devolution or particular needs or demands of communities in Northern Ireland play in the attitude and decision making of the Northern Ireland Executive in this regard?
I suppose it is the aspect of devolution where we want to ensure that we're best placed to respond to the needs of Northern Ireland beneficiaries. There are common issues across the UK where we can work together, but I think it's when we do work as a United Kingdom and those four parts coming together, something that we've seen during the recent pandemic, and I think it's when we do work together and give that commitment as four nations working for the good of the benefit of all four parts of our constituency. And that's where the Paymaster General's announcement on the 25th of March in regards to working with all the devolved authorities as well to make sure that we consult on any further changes to the scheme so that we can in future avoid the disparities that have happened in the past.
Now, in terms of the general funding arrangements for the Department of Health, and again, I'm sure Ms Redmond will be able to perhaps address this in some more detail, but in broad terms, is it right to understand that funding in respect of HIV payments comes from the Department of Health and Social Care?
That is correct to my understanding, but Ms Redmond can verify that for you.
Do you have any particular understanding of why the Department of Health provides direct funding, so the Department of Health and Social Care provides direct funding in relation to Northern Ireland in relation to HIV but not hepatitis C?
I don't.
And do you know whether there have been any particular difficulties in accessing or receiving this funding from the Department of Health and Social Care?
Not that has been brought to my attention in my term in office.
Okay, fine. Well, in that case, we'll pick up some, I think, perhaps some of the more specific points with Ms Redmond on that. In terms of long-term commitment, the current scheme, and we can look at the service level agreement or directions if necessary, but the current scheme in Northern Ireland, in common, I think, with the schemes in other parts of the United Kingdom, uses the concept of making ex gratia payments. That's the terminology. And an ex gratia payment is a payment with no obligation, as it were. So a scheme based upon ex gratia payments won't necessarily give the kind of assurance or reassurance of long-term commitment that the infected and affected community may desire and need. To what extent are you, as Minister for Health or as a representative of the Department of Health and the Northern Ireland Executive, able to give any kind of assurance that payments for the infected and affected will continue for their lifetime?
I can give the assurances and the commitments that I can while I'm in this office. And the payments have been set down and are there. This inquiry will also make its recommendations as well. And that's what our phase 3 will introduce as well. So I hope and I will be seeking that any successor to my appointment also honours the commitments that I have made in this office to those who have been infected, so that those payments that have been established are continued as well. But that will involve the support of all my executive colleagues, which also in Northern Ireland brings about the peculiarity of it involves a number of political parties actually having that understanding as well, which I think we have the support of here in Northern Ireland, because even if you go back to the meeting that we had in February, you will see that there was 2 political representatives attended with those families, Martina Anderson from Sinn Féin and Roy Beggs from the Ulster Unionist Party. So this is an issue that doesn't touch on political divides here in Northern Ireland, and I would hope that any of my successors can also look at it in that approach as well.
And are you able to assist with this? Is it, do you think, understood by both the Department of Health and colleagues in the Northern Ireland Executive that the absence of assurance, reassurance, long-term commitment may significantly increase the suffering, the anxiety and distress that individuals have experienced, and may mean they're unable to make life decisions in reliance upon making future payments, receiving future payments?
I do, Jenny. Sorry, Ms Richards, and I think that's one of the the points that was raised, and you referred to that back from my first announcement in regards to what we did as an interim payment. I am acutely aware of the uncertainty and the challenges that every one of these announcements actually brings to individuals who have been infected and affected. So that long-term reassurance and commitment, both from HMG, from the Paymaster General, but also from the Northern Ireland Executive, is crucial. And I think it was important that we do refer back to the New Decade, New Approach, where that commitment was made in regards to what was basically the foundation document for the restoration of devolution here in Northern Ireland back in January of last year.
I want to ask you next about two aspects that are not covered by the existing scheme, either in Northern Ireland or elsewhere in the United Kingdom. The first is financial support for those infected with hepatitis B in consequence of infected blood or blood products. Has the Northern Ireland Executive or the Department of Health, to your knowledge, ever expressly considered the inclusion of financial support for those infected with hepatitis B?
It's not something I am aware of, Ms. Richards, or have in front of me, but if Ms. Redmond can't follow up on it, we will respond to you in writing on that point, if that would be okay.
So I'm right to understand, you don't know if consideration's been given to it, and you don't know what the reasons are for its exclusion. Is that correct?
That's correct at this minute. It's not something I have. It's not something I have with me or in my head at this moment in time.
The second is that relates to the limited scope of financial support for those who have been bereaved. So, as we've already established through your answers and indeed the announcements you've made, the payments, both the one-off payments and the annual payments that you announced at the beginning of March of this year, are for those whose spouse or partner has died. But there's no wider financial support, for example, for adult children or for whose parents have died, or for parents whose children died. What is the justification for limiting bereavement payments, whether one-off or regular, to spouses and partners?
My understanding would be the identification of who would be eligible, and whether that be a wide-ranging number of individuals. Should there be no children, where that would go to next. One of the things that we have actually done is put the bereavement payable, or the bereavement payment, that £10,000 will be part of the estate of the deceased in cases where there is no spouse or partner. And that's part of our recent scheme reforms as well, so that rather than identifying children or next of kin, that it actually goes into the estate where that can be dealt with legally.
And we'll come on to that when we look
at £10,000 bereavement payment.
and we'll come on to that when we look at the late March 2021 announcement, both the Paymaster General's and your own. But in terms of any form of regular support, so leaving aside what the estate might be able to claim and who that might benefit, the Northern Ireland scheme, in common, I should say, with other schemes, makes no provision for other categories of relatives who may themselves have been financially affected and will certainly have been profoundly affected in mental and psychological terms by loss of child, loss of parent, two of the greatest losses imaginable. That's not been a feature of any of the schemes historically. And one task for the inquiry is to try and understand why and whether it is something that should be a feature of those schemes. So, first of all, is it something you've ever been asked to expressly consider as Minister?
It is something that was actually raised in the surveys that we did as well, as part of the feedback that we got there as well. So it is something that we're aware of. It is something that we're aware that this inquiry may also look at as well, and that will come into our phase 3 when we made that, the 3-phased approach that we took in regards of this issue.
Now, one can understand there might be financial constraints in terms of the amounts of money available to the department or the scheme at any particular time. But leaving aside financial constraints, can you think of any logical justification for limiting financial support to spouses and partners?
I suppose it would be the challenge would be the identification of who would be eligible and when they would be eligible, but it's not something that we have rolled out. And I say, we'll engage with we'll engage with the other four nations, the Paymaster General, and wait the outworkings of this inquiry in regards to how that can be done, if that is the direction of travel. As I say, I'm fully aware that that is an issue that has been raised by families and individuals, but also as part of our survey response as well.
Now, I want to come on to the discussions that have taken place on a four-nation basis. I'll come to the March 2021 announcement in a few moments, or in a few minutes. But first of all, can you assist us with what, if any, involvement you as a minister have had, or to your knowledge your officials have had, in discussions with the other three nations regarding parity since January 2020?
Prior to the announcement by the Paymaster General, my officials did provide an input to a detailed costing exercise. They participated in a number of discussions across the four nations in order to develop proposals to bring the schemes into broader parity, and that was prior to the announcement of the 25th of March. There was a ministerial meeting prior to that announcement, which involved representations of all, our ministerial level representation from all four nations.
So that was a March of this year meeting. Prior to that, between January 2020 and that meeting in March, had you been involved at ministerial level in any discussions with your fellow ministers in the other nations about steps that could be taken to achieve parity?
No.
And in terms of the work that officials had been taking, so officials within your department, costings were put together as to what funding Northern Ireland might require in order to achieve greater parity, and those were submitted to the Westminster Government. I think. Do you know of any other particular engagement or meetings that your officials participated in?
I wouldn't have the detail, but again, Mr. Edmund could update on the specific of those.
From your perspective, and again, I'm conscious you as it were came in in January 2020, and there had already been some, in principle, discussions in mid 2019 to explore parity. But do you have any understanding as to why it's taken until March 2021 for an announcement to be made about funding to achieve a greater degree of parity?
I don't, and I suppose that would be one for Cabinet Office or the Paymaster General to answer as a whole. I think since coming into office, we have taken the steps that we have in Northern Ireland to try to address what had been missing over the 3-year period that we didn't have a minister in post.
So I know at the time I want to look at some documents on this issue with Mr. Swann, but it might be convenient to take the break now, 5 minutes or so earlier, and then I can pick up those documents in one go with Mr. Swann after the break.
Well, that sounds sensible. So we'll take a break now. Mr. Swann allows you to have a refreshment, and others who are watching to do the same. We'll come back at 11:30. In the meantime, I say to you, as I say to all who give evidence, you're giving evidence. What you must not do is discuss the evidence you have given or any evidence you think you may yet be asked to give with anyone, whoever they are, but you can talk about anything else you like. 11:30.